This one's for entrepreneurs with Dan Nolan. One of the most honest, hardworking, genuine, and successful businessmen that I've had the pleasure of meeting. And Dan, look, I know how busy you are. I know how valuable your time is. And I really, really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to speak with me.
Great.
And being our first episode.
Very happy to do it. I'm excited to do it.
Great. So for the viewers, why don't you give us a little background on Dan Nolan, where you grew up, where you're from, where you went to high school, college, and how you became the businessman that you are today.
Can I give you the speed dating version?
That's what we're looking for.
I was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania. My father's family were coal miners. My mother's family were engineers. We spent 4 years in Scranton and then moved to Albany. I like to think I'm a native of Albany, but not really. Mm-hmm. I went through high school, public high school in Albany. Was not much of a student. I was more interested in cars and music.
Me either.
And then decided after I graduated from high school that I had to have a direction in life. So I enrolled at Hudson Valley, which is a 2-year community college in business administration. And my very first day of classes, I had a class in business law. And I met a professor, an adjunct, a practicing lawyer. And I walked out of that class and I said, I'm going to go to law school. Right. And I spent my first year at Hudson Valley working my butt off. It was a total turnaround for me. I learned how to learn. I learned to love learning. And I got straight A's in that year at Hudson Valley. And I transferred over to the State University of New York at Albany, now called UAlbany. I spent 3 years there working my butt off. I took a year off and worked to get some money and then went back to Albany Law School and graduated from Albany Law School in 1978. My career was serendipitous. Sally and I were looking to move to the Southwest. We didn't want to stay in what was then known as the Rust Belt, the Northeast. But my father-in-law died about 6 months before graduation. And so we decided to stay here for a couple years. I found a job at a company that I didn't know anything about up until that point in time. Turned out to be a marvelous opportunity for me because it used my lawyering skills and my finance skills. We were really inventing the practice of personal financial planning back then. The firm was called Ayco. And as opposed to spending 2 years there, I spent 22 years there. We sold that firm to Goldman Sachs, and I spent the next 4 years at Goldman Sachs in a variety of positions. I left in 2007, came back up to Albany, ran into Hugh Johnson and joined Hugh Johnson's asset management firm, where I've spent the last 10 years helping him build this firm out.
That's awesome. How many people were with Ayco when you first started?
Oh, there was probably 25 or 30 of us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, small firm, very entrepreneurial founder. Jim Conway was a guy who had started a bank, was involved in many different industries. In fact, Peter, he was a role model for me. I remember sitting in my office as a 24, 25-year-old lawyer and being totally amazed at what the guy knew, who he knew, what he had accomplished in life. He was just always, he was always hungry to figure out, what's the next step for me? What can I do next? And he was just very talented, very energetic, very moral, good values. And I'd say in business, he was probably my most important mentor.
Now, you've always kind of had an entrepreneurial spirit in you. So just to go back to Ayco, you started the special investment arm there.
Right.
If you don't mind me asking, what was that and what was your role? Because I know you created it and managed it.
Well, I have always had an entrepreneurial bent, Peter. I love building things, whether it's businesses or anything. I'm a builder, I think.
Yeah.
And so during my career at Ayco, I invested in a couple of private companies, companies that were not startups. They were ongoing companies, but they needed growth equity. I joined the boards, and I really was smitten with the notion of helping entrepreneurs build their businesses. I learned through those experiences that there are lots of investment opportunities for people beyond the stock market, the bond market, and so forth. So I took the idea to Ayco that we should start some funds for our clients to invest in what we now call today alternative investments. It could be venture capital, could be private equity, could be direct lending. And so I started that group for Ayco and ran it until the Goldman Sachs sale.
Yeah, that's kind of what I want to get into. And this is a little bit more of a funny question because I probably send you 10 to 15 emails a day. I mean, not a day, maybe a week with different ideas. Maybe a day, probably. And, first off, how many ideas, pitches, and business plans do you receive?
I couldn't count them all. I get inundated, and part of it is because I'm out in the traffic intentionally. I want people to know that I'm interested in looking at opportunities. I'm interested for the right opportunities to invest and to help build a board, maybe mentor the founder, maybe bring in a CEO. So people know that I'm interested. So I get lots and lots of things to look at. But this is the interesting statistic, Peter. I would bet for every 100 deals that I look at, there might be 8 to 10 that I'm interested in. And then out of that 8 to 10, there might be 1 or 2 that I follow through on.
Now, could you tell me, and maybe it's not a mistake, but I'm going to say it anyway, what is the most common mistake you see, whether it's with those presentations that you see or in another scenario, that entrepreneurs make when they're first trying to start a business?
Well, I would say everybody at the beginning thinks their idea is the best idea in the world. Sometimes it is, lots of times it isn't.
Yeah.
I think the biggest mistake that startup entrepreneurs in startups make is I think they underestimate the difficulty of scaling a business. I'm not denigrating ideas because new ideas are not easy to come by. But coming up with an idea and then proving that it might work, in other words, that it might be commercializable, is not the hardest part of building a company. The hardest part starts, in my view, when you have an idea that you've had proof of concept, it's commercializable. Now you have to take that from a very small business with a few people to a business that is well capitalized, that has the right team in place. And I'd say in 99 out of 100 cases, you got to step aside eventually as the CEO and let somebody who's done it before, that is scaled up a business, come in and do it. So I think the biggest mistake is underestimating the difficulty of scaling it up. So you don't raise enough capital, you don't bring the right team members in. I think you just underestimate how hard it's going to be to do that.
And that's really a great point. Do you think that, taking all those things into factor, do you think that there's a question that every entrepreneur should ask themselves before, or some advice that you could provide to an entrepreneur that they should ask themselves before they become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, you probably ask yourself, am I slightly out of my mind?
Well, I am, so I'm on. I'm in.
Because there's a lot of things in life that you can't learn by reading a book or by instruction. I couldn't teach you how to swim by giving you a pamphlet and saying, Peter, this is how you do it. You got to jump in. And I think for entrepreneurs, that's also true. I think people often can't imagine what being an entrepreneur is like. Long hours, constant flexibility. I tell young people that when you're an entrepreneur, plan B is the most popular plan in business because plan A is never going to work.
Agreed.
Tireless work, 8 to 5 doesn't mean anything. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whatever you need. So there's a certain personality type, there's a certain energy level, and there's a certain amount of hard-headed persistence that you have to be successful as an entrepreneur. If you don't have those traits, I don't care how good your idea is, you're not going to survive.
Yeah, and I think that was a great point. I know how hard you work. At your age right now, how many hours do you still put in a week, and how many days do you think you work?
Well, I work 7 days a week. Now, I work in different ways, Peter. There are nights that I'm out to dinner with someone, and outsiders might look and say, he's not working, he's entertaining so-and-so. Those are often dinners that have a business purpose. And sometimes the purpose might be, I just want to get to know this man or this woman. On the weekends, I'm working. Do I take some time to relax? Yes. I'll put the Golf Channel on, or I'll watch a basketball game, or I'll read a book. So I have bursts of, periods when I relax. But I get phone calls. I make phone calls over the weekend. I have a briefcase of reading over the weekend. So to be candid, Peter, I'm on all the time. I'm hardly ever off the grid.
One of the things that I think is special about you when I'm around in the room and I see you interact with people, even with people that you don't know, you're able to build a type of rapport with them that makes everyone feel comfortable in that room. Does that come with experience? And I think that'd be helpful also for entrepreneurs. How do they walk into a room, make people feel confident, make the room feel comfortable? How do you do it? And
I don't think I was born with that skill, Peter. In fact, if you knew me when I was in high school, I couldn't stand up in front of a class of 20 people and give a speech or give a report. I was terrified. My knees shook. My mouth would get dry. When I went to work at Ayco, I was thrust into a situation where I had to start to advise very successful, wealthy people. We built a seminar business at one point where I had to stand in rooms full of 30, 40, 50, 100 people. For me, it was an acquired taste. I was not born with that skill. And I think as the years went on and I realized that everybody is the same, no matter how wealthy they are, no matter how successful they've been, no matter their age, we're all basically the same people. Yeah, we have different personality traits and so forth. As the years went on, I just got more and more comfortable and I learned how to talk to people. And I'll tell you, one of the tricks that I still try to use is when I walk into a room full of people, I can usually find the one or two or three people that are not comfortable. They're the Dan Nolan of 30, 40 years ago. They're the people I go talk to. I try to help them understand how to feel comfortable and let them know that I felt that way when I was young. But I usually go to the underdog and try to make them comfortable.
And I think, when you're trying to start a business or you first start, I was lucky enough that, I had you as a mentor and some others. And it really did a lot for me on how to grow my business or to think about, how to scale it correctly, like you were talking about earlier. How important is it to have a mentor as an entrepreneur? And who was yours and what did you learn from them?
Yeah, Peter, when I was young, in my late 20s, I started to work with very, very successful people. Some of them were entrepreneurs. Some of them were CEOs of the biggest companies in the world. You'd know some of their names. Yep. Entertainers. I worked with a lot of different kinds of people. And I was always trying to decide, what are the common threads? Because they were all different. Some were extroverted. Some were introverted. Some seem, more technical and brainy. Some seem more sales-oriented. I was always looking for what the common thread was. And I used to ask people, how did you get successful? Many of them said, hey, I met so-and-so. He was a great, manager at GE, let's say. He mentored me. He promoted me up through the system. I don't think it's impossible to be successful without a mentor, but with a high-quality mentor, it's easier. And as I said earlier, my first real mentor in business was Jim Conway. Okay. He was a lawyer. He was an entrepreneur. He started several companies. And I watched him. I watched how he worked during the day. I watched how he spoke. And I tried to emulate.
Did you email him as many times as I email you?
No, I don't think he would have read them. Actually, I know I didn't. We didn't have email back then. I had to do handwritten notes. But no, I worked very closely with Jim. And Jim was a real high-quality, high-energy mentor to me. So one of the pieces of advice that I try to give to young people is if mentors show up, take advantage of them. If they don't show up, look for them, because having an experienced mentor, and look, we've all had our failures, right? If anybody tells you their career has been absolutely free of potholes, bumps, failures, they're lying to you. Yeah. So we've all hit the potholes, right? We've all had. So a mentor can, if they're honest and if they're a good mentor, they'll tell you where they failed. They'll tell you what their shortcomings were, and they'll help you overcome those. I think a mentor is critical.
Yeah. That's great. And so I know you invest in startups and businesses that are obviously a little higher than that. But do you have a systematic approach when you're looking at a startup that, a systematic approach that you take to invest in that company? And is there specific personality traits you look for in that entrepreneur before you invest?
Yeah, it's really hard to narrow down, Peter. I try to stay away from things that I don't know anything about. However, if I do see an opportunity and it sounds like it might have real potential, and I don't know anything about it, I might bring somebody in that does know something about it, and I might still pursue it. But I'm most comfortable with business models that I know something about. That's first. Secondly, when I meet the person who's the founder or who's the energy behind it, I absolutely have to be convinced that that person has passion. It's not, I'm tinkering, I'm doing it nights and weekends, I'm having fun with it. The person has to have real passion for what they're doing, because the turbulence that they're going to run into in building that company is going to mean that if they don't have that kind of passion, if they don't have a huge fire in their belly, they're not going to make it. So the passion of the entrepreneur. And then third, I look for somebody who's had some experiences in life beyond just starting this business. Now, look, there are folks that came right out of college and started companies and they're worth billions of dollars. That's the rare exception. That's the very, very rare exception. I love to find entrepreneurs that have had some well-rounded experiences at other things. Maybe they've failed a few times. Maybe they've had a few successes. So people that are a little more seasoned than somebody right out of school. Doesn't mean I won't pay attention to somebody right out of school, but if I had my druthers, I like a little seasoning.
Yeah, I would agree. I say failures are key. I mean, the failures that I've run to in my early career as an entrepreneur, I think have taught me lessons that I wouldn't have taken it back. Of course. I would have done it again.
Of course.
If I had to 100%.
Winston Churchill said the definition of success is moving from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm. It's a little bit of an exaggeration, but if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to fail.
Oh, yeah.
And you're going to fail at some things. And you have to have that, that vigor, the passion to get up and dust yourself off and keep going.
Yep. He also said, if you're going through hell, keep going.
Yeah. It's true, though, Peter.
Yeah.
You had asked a question about, people, mentors that I had and who I learned from. And I mentioned that one of the common traits was this notion of, people being persistent and, people having mentors. And I'll tell you another common trait that I see in really successful people, and that is every pursuit in life. You start down the road and there's turbulence of some sort. Sometimes it's a little bit of turbulence. Sometimes it's a lot of turbulence. Successful people can block out the noise and not give up and keep going at the target. Now, sometimes, again, you have to go to plan B. So you have to go through the noise. You got to go under the noise. You got to go around the noise. But persistence is another great trait. And so I do look for people who I think are going to have that kind of persistence, the never say die attitude. So if you're going through hell, keep going. If you fail, it's not over. You just pick yourself up and you go on.
Would you mind telling us about one of those experiences where you had to navigate through?
Yeah, I think, I've had several experiences in my life that haven't worked out the way that I thought they would work out. In fact, one experience I already mentioned. My wife and I were getting ready to pack up and go to the Sun Belt. I was interviewing with firms in Phoenix, places that were the center of the new service economy versus the old. And so my father-in-law died suddenly. Obviously a family tragedy, but also he was in his late 50s, but also, a big disappointment for me because I realized that family comes first. I've always lived that way in my life. It was more important to surround my mother-in-law than to pack up and start a career elsewhere. So a major disappointment. But I started the very next day, looking for opportunities here in Albany. I will admit I was lucky. I did not find Ayco. A tax professor at Albany Law School called me and said, I heard you're in the market again. You should go meet Jim Conway, and I did. I went to the firm, and I said to my wife, let's give it 2 years, and then we'll pack up and we'll move. Well, within about 2 or 3 months, I realized the big idea that Jim Conway was pursuing. Yeah. And I totally switched gears, and I said, this is an opportunity. We got to give up the idea of moving. We're going to stay right here, and I'm going to help build this enterprise because I see the vision, and I think we can do it together. So sometimes, the old saying, you get lemons and you make lemonade. I've had many occasions in my life where, there's a sharp left turn you don't see coming, and you have to be flexible and make the best of it. And I'll tell you the other thing you have to do, Peter. You have to really assess yourself. Strengths and weaknesses. Where do I need to do better? And where can I do better? And then work on those areas that you think you can do better at. We all have them. We know them better than anybody else.
Do you think you should focus more on your strengths or on your weaknesses? Or should
That's
you
a good
find
question.
someone that can handle those weaknesses for you and you focus on your strong
Well, a
suits in the
good
business?
mentor, if you can't self-assess well, a good mentor will help you figure out where you need to work. And, we always say work on your weaknesses. They may not be weaknesses. They may just be skills that have yet to be developed. I mean, I could look back and say, boy, I was a really weak public speaker. I couldn't do public. I'm not sure I was a weak public speaker. I hadn't developed those skills. So,
that's a good point.
We often talk in terms of strengths and weaknesses. Maybe not always weaknesses. Maybe they're just skills that are underdeveloped in you. But you do have to identify them, and you do have to work on them.
100%. That's something that I'm starting to do, and you could see the improvements.
Right.
I want to take a step back when you spoke about your wife and family. Mm-hmm. I know when Ayco merged with Goldman Sachs. Mm-hmm. Maybe you talk a little bit about how you would take the train 2 or 3 times, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs these days don't know. Yeah. Not that they don't know, but they need they don't understand how much work and sacrifice goes into it. So maybe just give us a taste of what you had to do traveling to the city and how you balanced your marriage and your family and kept everything contained and happy.
All right. Well, in 2003, when we merged Ayco into Goldman Sachs, I was 51 years old. And I got anointed and was very happy about it. I got anointed to be the person to go down to Goldman and do the integration of Ayco into Goldman Sachs. My kids were in high school. I had run an Ayco office in New York and in Connecticut, so we lived down there for a while. We didn't want to disrupt the family again, take the kids out of high school and move back downstate. So the deal that I had arranged was I would go to New York Monday morning on a 5 o'clock train, get into the city around 7, and I'd be at the Goldman office at 7:30. So I would stay over, probably work till 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, then stay over Monday night, work till about 6 o'clock Tuesday, and then take the 7 o'clock train home. And then Wednesday morning, get up at 4 o'clock again, take the 5 o'clock train down, spend Wednesday night, come home Thursday night, and then I worked out of an office up here. And it was long hours, but I will tell you, getting up at 4 o'clock is no different from getting up at 6. You're tired either at 4 or 6. It's all mental, Peter. Yeah. And if you have the passion for what you're doing, if you're excited and inspired by what you're doing, it doesn't matter. And I can tell you, I was in my early 50s, and that was another phase of my career, and it was 4 great years. And I didn't mind the 4 o'clock alarm and the 5 o'clock train. Yeah. But anything worth doing in life is really worth working for, and I've never minded that. It's really attitude.
Yeah. And then I know you always told me, and when you would spend time with your family, you would make sure you were there, you were present. I think that is so key in a relationship.
Yeah, I didn't go bowling on Tuesday nights, and I didn't golf Saturday and Sunday, and I started golfing when my 8-year-old son decided he wanted to try golf. I took up the game at age 44, and primarily so that we would have something to do together. When I was home, I was home. Now, it might be that I had my briefcase out on a Saturday afternoon while the kids were playing. I was working, but I wasn't off bowling or playing golf or spending time outside my family. That was my priority in my off hours.
Yeah, one question that I forgot to ask you that interests me earlier on is just to hop back, is equity. When someone is starting, an entrepreneur is starting off and he starts his business, how does he protect his equity, and who should he talk to for his advice? Because there could be 100 different scenarios. You could find the partner you've always dreamed of, but how important is equity to that entrepreneur?
Equity is very dear, because the way you're going to get paid as an entrepreneur ultimately is on the way out of that company, whether it's a sale of the business, a merger of the business, a strategic investor coming in, buying a big piece of the business. Equity is your payday. I've always said the American dream, the definition of American dream is expenses expand to meet income. You don't get rich on income. You spend your income. So if you can afford a Plymouth, you buy a Plymouth. If you can afford a Ferrari, you buy a Ferrari. The way people really build wealth is through the ownership of something. So equity is your ownership. It's dear. And when you start up a business, equity is like a block of ice. It starts as a big block of ice, and it starts to melt away. Every time you bring more money, more capital, more people into the business, the equity melts down. So the block of ice, at the time you sell that business or merge it, is going to be a lot smaller than it is when you start out. So equity is dear. What you have to try to do, Peter, is protect it to the best of your ability. And you should surround yourself with some people who have been through the startup scenario before. A very good lawyer, so an entrepreneurial lawyer who deals with startups. Build a board of people that have done it before. Talk to other entrepreneurs who've done it before. There's no magic formula for how you protect it. Some of it is good negotiation, and some of it is how fast do you want to grow this business. Sometimes bringing more equity in, meaning diluting yourself down, is a better thing, because I'd rather own 1% of a company worth $500 billion than 50% of a company worth $100 million. Yeah. So there's no formula, but you got to really pay attention to your equity.
Yeah, and you said something that made me think of a question. You've been not lucky enough, but you've been hardworking enough to work with some very wealthy people.
Right.
And I'm sure you've seen the habits that have made them successful.
Right.
Maybe you could talk about that, but also maybe some of the downfalls that you've seen.
Yeah.
That what has made them, downfall? What has been some of the downfall?
Well, the habits, again, I'll go back to you got to have passion. You got to have a high energy level. You got to be persistent. So the idea that if you fall down or you have to go to plan B, the idea that you have to be surrounded by people who are better than you, who've done this before. I think you have to be good with people.
100%.
Because you have to be able to articulate your ideas. You have to be able to sell yourself as well as your ideas. So those are a lot of the common traits. Downfalls, Peter, I think come mostly from people underestimating the risks involved in what they're doing. I've had friends that have had really good businesses, but they get too far out over their skis too fast, and the risks eat them up. Sometimes people say, look, I don't want equity because equity's dear, and so they borrow money for growth, and debt is great on the way up, but when things come apart, debt is an unforgiving master. And sometimes I think people fail because their ego won't allow them to step aside and bring somebody in who knows the craft of scaling up a business. Yeah. And it is a craft. And so you have to work hard. You have to have self-confidence, but you also have to be honest with yourself.
Yeah, you have to know what you don't know.
Right. And when you are starting out, first-time entrepreneur, I still think the best thing you can do is surround yourself with people who've been down that path before. They know where the potholes are, and they'll protect you from some mistakes that you would otherwise make.
Get the people with the experience.
Absolutely.
So we have a few more questions here.
Sure.
I just want to talk your business. You have 170 plus clients. I think you oversee 60 institutions. You have a recent merger. How the hell do you keep everyone motivated in your office, and how do you keep your clients happy?
Lou Holtz was a very well-known coach who was known for motivating his players and the rest of the staff. And somebody once said to him, Lou, how do you motivate these people? And he said, oh, that's easy. I just fire anybody who's not motivated. I'm not sure you can motivate people. I think motivation, it comes from within.
I agree.
And I think there are some people, and I'm not being judgmental, but I think there's some people who enjoy a job where you go in at 9 and you go home at 5 and you know what your work effort is every day. You know exactly what's expected. the same, you work through the same patterns every day. And that's great because you need people like that.
Yeah.
But there are some of us who have this great fire within, who are intellectually interested in a lot of different things, who have passion for a lot of different things. And we often call that motivation. We often say, wow, that person's really motivated. If you said to me, are you a really motivated person? I'd have to think about it, but I'd probably say to you, Peter, no, I'm just blessed with a very high energy level and a very high intellectual curiosity. And so I want to do things. The hardest thing for me to do is to say no, because there's so many things that I enjoy doing, so many people I want to get to know. So what I do here, Peter, is rather than look at my job as motivating people, what I do is I tell everybody what the vision is. You have to have a glide path. You have to have a vision for where you're going. You know that line from Lewis Carroll, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. You got to know the ultimate destination, and then you can build the path. So one is get the vision. Two is share it with everybody else. Let everybody know where are we going. The third thing is tell everybody what their place is. Okay, Peter, so this is the vision of the firm, and this is the role you're going to play. Then I have to give you the tools to do it. And this is the part where a lot of companies fall down. I have to hold you accountable. Being nice doesn't equate to success. Being busy doesn't equate to success.
No.
I have to hold you accountable to do the things that I've told you have to do. And then the last part of it is if you do them, I have to reward you, and I have to reward you well. If you do that with people and you promote the best people up through the system, if your goal is not mediocrity but greatness, people will be motivated. The right people will be motivated. So I can't motivate them. I can provide the atmosphere and the opportunity for them to get ahead, but I can't motivate them.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I want to just talk a little bit about some of the great things you do for the Capital Region. I don't think we have enough time in the day to really list all of them. But let's just talk about the AFL football team. What made you want to get involved with the AFL, the Albany Empire? What excited you about it? And
Peter, there were two things. One is, as you know, we've had some professional sports teams here in Albany. We had the AA Yankees team.
Yep.
We didn't support it. We've had several hockey teams. We had the Devils most recently, the New Jersey Devils team. We couldn't support any of the hockey teams. We had a professional lacrosse team. We couldn't support it. The one professional team that we had here in Albany that drew 10,000 plus fans a night was an indoor arena football team. And it was back in the 90s, and they were called the Albany Firebirds. I used to take my kids to the games. They were fantastic, 2.5 hours of entertainment, high-quality football. And so we had a history here of having a professional sports team that was supported. Unfortunately, that league didn't survive. Here's what happened. Two friends of mine and I were having lunch together, and it was right after the Devils, the last hockey team, announced it was leaving. We were lamenting the fact that Albany has been through several professional sports franchises, and we haven't held them. And it was disappointing to us because, as you know, Albany is going through a renaissance, business, residential.
Agreed.
The city is really on the upswing. Within a couple of months, I got a call from the manager of the Times-Union Arena saying, Ron Jaworski, who used to be the quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, owns an indoor arena football team and wants to rebuild the league. And there's another really good owner. I didn't know who it was at the time, but it's the individual that owns a couple of professional hockey and a professional basketball franchise. And Bob said they'd like to talk to somebody about bringing an AFL team and an indoor arena football team back. So I called my two friends up and said, you're not going to believe this, but I just got a call from the manager of the Times-Union Center saying Ron Jaworski wants to meet with us. So we said, why not? The Firebirds were fabulously exciting. They were successful. We were just lamenting the fact that we've lost yet another professional team here in Albany. So Ron came up with his partners, and over the course of the next several months, we had meetings and realized these were serious owners. They were going to make a serious effort at building the Indoor Arena Football League again, that we could be actively involved in it. We had a lot of confidence that Albany could support the team, and so we signed on. And the three of us started the team here. And as you know, our inaugural season was an off-the-chart season. We broke the record for attendance. We had the best record.
People game.
The MVP of the year was our quarterback. The wide receiver of the year was one of our wide receivers. The rookie of the year was one of our wide receivers. So it was a chance to A, help the community. B, it was a chance to do something that we thought would be exciting for the community. And the three of us didn't have nearly enough to do, so we needed something else to.
I mean, I have to say though, being in the city, hearing all different age groups talk about it and talk about how excited they are about it and how they're going to the game. It's something that I don't think Albany has experienced in a while. So I wanted to say thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome. And what's really great about it is on our game nights, we have, as you know, we do a block party. Outside the arena. We close off the street that runs in front of the arena. We get thousands of people to come out, rain or shine. Everybody gets excited about the game. We have a high-quality entertainment, usually a rock or a country band. And then at 7 o'clock, we all file into the arena, and we have 2.5 hours of absolute terrific entertainment. People can, forget their problems, bring their families. It's affordable. It's a great indoor environment. So it's just terrific. And then the crowd disperses at 9:30, and you go to the local restaurants and the bars, and Albany comes alive. So it's a fuse that I hope we've lit. And, when you look outside here, you'll see more people in the streets after hours than we had, 10 years ago. And I think that momentum will continue to build.
And I also see them doing a lot of things for the community, whether it's going to the food shelters and things like that. I think that's really special to connect in the community that way. So I think you guys are doing a great job, and I look forward to seeing it continue to grow.
Yeah.
So the last question, which I'm going to try to end every episode with, is what is the best business advice you've ever received?
I think the best business advice that I've ever received is, don't compare yourself to other people. Compete with yourself. Be the best you can be. A lot of people spend much of their careers worrying about that person over there or this person over here. You can't be better than you are. You can make yourself the best you can be. And a lot of us are better than what we might perceive. I think as I've grown through my career, I've been a little surprised at some of the things I've been able to do. Stop competing with everybody else. Compete against yourself. Worry about being the best that you can be. And just keep your head down and keep your legs moving.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dan. It's been an honor to have you here. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Peter. Hope it's been helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks.